Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm sharing a really fun and easy technique to create absolutely stunning cards using your embossing folders. This is such a quick way to mass produce beautiful designs. All you really need is a pretty embossing folder and some gorgeous colors to play with. It's the perfect twist to elevate your regular embossed backgrounds. Well, this video is also extra special as it marks the start of Stamptember, which is a month-long celebration filled with new releases, surprises, and tons of crafty inspiration. For today's project, I'll be working with the Boho Flowers 3D embossing folder from the new Stamptember collection. This folder is packed with rich details. We have flowing vines, graceful leaves, and a playful boho style flowers that emboss beautifully with incredible depth. Normally, I just run a white cardstock panel through the embossing folder and then do a little ink blending on top of that. But today we are flipping things around. We will actually be inking up the embossing folder itself. Since every embossing folder has two sides, we have the embossed, which is the raised side, and the debossed side, which is the flatter side. I'll show you how to use both with the ink. The results are completely different looks and both make for gorgeous, one of a kind card fronts. I really love using this inking technique on embossing folders that have rich, intricate designs where the background is filled with beautiful patterns. I usually avoid it on folders with minimal details since the effect isn't as striking. Now, for today's project, I have prepared two green cardstock panels, each cut to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. You could absolutely use plain white cardstock and add any ink color of your choice, but I wanted to go with a tone on tone look using green on green to create beautifully subtle background effect. Now, to keep my panel in place, I'll add a little bit of adhesive on the back. I do not have temporary adhesive on hand, so I'm using a regular double sided tape. Now, since that's much stronger than your usual temporary adhesive, I just dust it with some anti static powder using a paintbrush. This makes it less tacky and ensures it won't damage or stick permanently to your embossing folder. For the first layer, I'm inking up the raised portion of the folder. I'm using positively saturated ink in the shade Pine, which is a gorgeous dark green. You could go for a contrasting color if you'd like, but since I'm sticking with a tone on tone effect, I chose a lighter green cardstock with a deeper green ink to really bring out all those intricate embossed details. What you're seeing here is me applying the ink in real time. This part of the video isn't sped up, so you can get a true sense of how long it actually takes to add color to the embossing folder. I like to take my time with this step. I am gently swiping or more often tapping the ink pad directly onto the raised areas of the folder. You could also use a brayer tool if you prefer for a smoother application. I do recommend using nice juicy ink pads since that really helps achieve an even layer of color. Now, once I was happy with the amount of ink coverage, I closed the folder, made my sandwich, and ran it through my Sizzix die cutting machine. For the sandwich, I'm using the thick base layer. Then I have the embossing folder with a paper inside and just one cutting plate on top. Most 3D embossing folders are compatible with the standard die cutting machines, but I always recommend checking your machine's manual to make sure you're using the right plate combination. Well, with just one pass and a single layer of ink, I already had a beautifully detailed etched design. The panel looked gorgeous right away, but I wanted to intensify the color, so I went with a second layer. Since my cardstock panel was taped securely in place, I didn't have to worry about anything shifting. I simply repeated the same inking process on the raised side of the folder and ran it through my die cutting machine again. And well, here's a look at the first panel. Absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? With those multiple passes, the paper did stick a little inside the embossing folder, but I carefully used a palette knife to lift it out from the spot where we had the adhesive. That way, I avoided any tearing or damage to the paper. I just love how that dark green ink settled into all of those etched designs, creating just a striking contrast against the soft green background. Here's a closer look at that panel. I'm absolutely loving this panel, and this is a design that you could definitely mass produce in a bunch of different colors. I will set that panel aside and move on to the second one. Just like before, I'll add some double-sided tape to the back of this panel and secure it. Don't forget to add your little anti-static powder if you're not using a temporary adhesive. Now, this time I'm securing the panel onto the raised part of the embossing folder. This is the side where we previously applied the ink. Now, for this panel, I'll be inking up the debossed side of the embossing folder. I'm following the same exact process as before, gently tapping the ink pad across the flat surface. You'll really notice the difference between inking the debossed side versus the embossed side. Each gives a completely unique look. I like to think of this as a fun twist on the blackout technique. Instead of coloring in all the images, you leave them untouched, and rather than swiping ink across the panel, you apply the ink directly onto your embossing folder. I'd actually love to try another version sometime wherein I would be coloring in the details first, and then instead of swiping my ink pad, I would add ink to the deboss side. That's definitely an idea we can explore in a future video. Now, once I had applied the ink, I ran the sandwich through my die cutting machine and I was instantly in love with the result. I did go back with a second coat of ink to deepen the color, and honestly, I love it even more. This is definitely a technique I want to experiment with in a lots of different shades and combinations, whether with the monochromatic tones for a subtle look or even bold rainbow blends for something more vibrant. Either way, it's a gorgeous effect that works beautifully with any embossing folder that you have in your stash. Here's a side by side look at both the card panels we created today. Aren't they absolutely stunning? Well, it's hard to believe that we use the same exact embossing folder to achieve two completely different and unique card fronts. I'd love to hear from you. What color combinations would you try for this technique? Let me know in the comments below. Technically, at this stage, these card fronts are completely ready to be mounted on a card base, but you all know me, so I can never resist adding a little extra sparkle and shine to my projects, especially when the backgrounds already look this gorgeous. So I bought both the panels into my splatter box and pulled out some metallic gold watercolors. Using a brush, I added a generous amount of gold splatter across the surface. I just love the way those tiny little flecks of shimmer cast the light against that bold green background. It not only enhances the overall design but also adds a fun texture and sparkle that really elevates that monochromatic look. The contrast of that deep green with those golden splatters feels so elegant and festive. It's a perfect finishing touch for your backgrounds, like these absolutely gorgeous embossed and colored backgrounds. While the panels were drying, I moved on to creating the sentiments for both these cards. I wanted one to be a birthday card and the other to have a more versatile sentiments, something that could work for a birthday card, a thank you card, or even a thinking of you card. For the first card, I reached out for the Sunflower Garden stamp set, which was actually part of the Stamptember 2022 collection. Well, that release was extra special to me since it was my very first Stamptember as part of the Simon Says Stamp Designer family. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity and my amazing team. From this step, I chose the sentiment which says, May your day be as beautiful as a field of wildflowers, which I felt like a perfect match for such a detailed floral background. I stamped it in crisp black ink on a simple white cardstock panel. For my second card, I went with a classic happy birthday sentiment from the modern scrapbook stamp set, which was part of one of the Simon Says stamp card kits, which also included the coordinating dies. Now, this time I heat embossed the greeting in white embossing powder on black cardstock for a bold and striking look. I mounted both the sentiments onto the card panels using foam tape for an extra bit of dimension. On the first panel, where I had inked up the raised side of the embossing folder, the background turned out to be lighter, so I paired it with a black happy birthday sentiment. I thought the contrast worked beautifully. For my second panel, since the background was much darker, I went with the white sentiment strip instead. It really stood out against that deep green and added a perfect balance to the design. With the sentiments in place, it was time to mount the panel onto the card bases. Now, whenever I work with embossed backgrounds, I like to use foam tape instead of regular double sided tape. It gives a stronger hold and helps accommodate all those raised and etched details. I mounted both the panels onto A2 size top folding white card bases. Now, even though we already had those gorgeous metallic watercolor splatters on the backgrounds, I wanted to add a little bit of extra sparkle. I grabbed some pastel tone, positively dazzling gems and added a few soft yellow gold gems scattered on either side of my sentiment strips. It's a small detail, but it really adds fun, elegant touch to the cuts. Well, you really have to look closely to notice those gemstones are actually adhered to the panel, but when you tilt the card against the light, they catch it beautifully and add such a lovely shine to the card front. Before I wrap it up, I also wanted to give a quick shout out to that beautiful funnel tray you see here. Now, this one is by Cat Scrappiness. It's perfect for keeping all your gems in place while working with them. Now, I find it much more convenient than your traditional triangle trays because it can hold a lot of gems and sequences at once and makes it picking the right size for your card so much more easier than the smaller triangle trays. Plus, the little cap on the ends lets you pour everything back into the container without any spills. It is such a handy tool for any gems or sequin loving crafter. And there you have it, two completely unique, stunning card fronts created with the same embossing folder. I hope this video inspires you to try inking both the embossed and the debossed sides of your folders and experimenting with colors, metallics, and fun embellishments. Don't forget, this is just the beginning of Stamptember, which is a month long event full of exciting new releases, fun challenges, and tons of crafty inspirations. Make sure to check out the latest Stamptember products and see what amazing goodies you can add to your collection. Now, all the supplies that I use to create these cards will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links will be affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Well, I'm so excited you're here today because we have officially stepped into the most amazing, wonderful time of the year. It's Stamptember time. Now, if you're new to it, Stamptember is a month long celebration of stamping hosted by Simon Says Stamp, and this year marks their 16th anniversary. It's always such a fun month filled with brand new products, exciting collaborations, giveaways, surprises, and of course, tons of creative inspirations from incredibly talented designers. If you'd like to learn more about Stamptember, I have all the details up on my blog. And well, here's the fun part. I am sharing a special coupon code for a free surprise gift. Don't miss it. You'll find the blog link down below in the description box. For today's project, I'll be working with a beautiful stamp set from this new Stamptember collection to create three clean and simple card designs. My goal with this project is to show you how easy it can be to take just a few supplies from your stash and make something absolutely stunning, especially when you're mass producing a certain style of card. Well, you don't always have to stick to one design and multiple colors. Instead, I kept the color palette constant but changed up the layouts of all the three cards. The first product that I'll be using here is this gorgeous Highland Cows stamp set. Now, this one is truly unique and something I haven't worked with before. It has such a rustic charm featuring this beautifully illustrated Highland cows with their long horns and shaggy coats. Along with the images, you'll also find versatile sentiments like thank you, birthday, and friend, which can be paired with the coordinating sub sentiments inside those label frames. The second product is this brand new postage rectangles die set, which includes 9 A2 size rectangle dies with a fun postage edge detail. I'll be using these to create my card fronts and add a little extra interest to the backgrounds. I began by placing a white 4 by 5 and a quarter inch panel onto my stamp wheel. Since I'll be creating three different cards, each will follow the same basic layout. We have the focal point images that will be stamped in a warm mocha brown ink, while the sentiments will be featured in lumberjack plaid distress ink, and that's well a gorgeous rich red shade of ink. The VersaFine Onyx Black ink again for part of the sentiment for that crisp, bold finish. Now, these three shades, which is the brown, red, and black, make up the color palette across all of the designs. For my first card, which is a birthday card, I started with a sentiment. Because I knew I'd be doing multiple impressions, I stamped each of the elements separately. The main birthday sentiment was stamped in lumberjack plaid distress ink, pressing it 3 times to achieve a bold, vibrant red. Now, to keep everything perfectly aligned, I always like to use my grid transparency sheet each time that I stamped. Now, after finishing my main sentiment, I brought back my grid transparency sheet, and now we can stamp our little sub sentiment. Now, the smaller sub sentiment here reads, I heard it's your. Now, together the sentiment will be, I heard it's your birthday, which I think pairs perfectly with this playful Highland cow theme. You'll notice that I take extra time to carefully align all of my sentiments. That's because I'm stamping them directly onto the card front. Now, if I was planning to cut out the sentiments separately, I wouldn't need to be quite as precise with the placement. There are coordinating dies available for this set, but for today's video, I will keep it simple and work with the stamps alone. Now, I decided to slow down this part of the video to share a quick tip. Once you place your grid transparency sheet over the panel, you can do a light test stamp to double check the alignment. Now just add the faintest bit of ink to your stamp and press it onto the transparency sheet. This way you can clearly see your stamp lines up and get a preview of how the final impression will look. At this stage, you don't need any full inking. It's only for reference, so a light impression is all you need. Once you're happy with the placement of your stamp, simply remove the transparency sheet and stamp as usual. For the sentiment, I used my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which gives that bold, crisp impression every time. Now, I did stamp it twice for that beautiful black. Next, I moved to my focal point image, which is that gorgeous large Highland cow that really takes center stage on this card front. I stamped it using the Simon's Stamp Positively Saturated ink in the shade Mocha, which is a rich, warm brown that works beautifully with this design. Now, you could definitely take this image further, add coloring, or heat emboss it with black ink and clear embossing powder for a glossy finish, or even layer in the extra details. Now, there are so many creative possibilities, but for this project, I wanted to keep things clean and simple, so I left the image uncolored. To make those lines stand out even more, I stamped the cow twice, which gave me a deeper, richer impression of that beautiful mocha tone. I'll admit I was really tempted to add some paint splatters or even a few sequences for extra sparkle on this panel, but I held back and kept it super simple. Instead, I used the little star images from the stamp set, stamping them in the same lumberjack plaid ink. I added a few stars on either side of that bold focal point image to balance the design without taking away from the clean and simple look. And just like that, card number one was finished. I used my little pokey tool to gently lift one corner of the cardstock and release it from the ultra sticky mat on the stamp wheel. I really love how clean and simple this design turned out. Well, let me know in the comments below, would you leave the Highland cow uncolored like I did here, or would you add some color to it? Now, moving on to background number two, we are keeping the main elements consistent. We have a brown stamped focal point image, sentiments in black and red, and a few stars scattered around the sentiments for a balance. Now, this time I started with the focal point image first. Instead of using a single large Highland cow, I stamped two cows facing each other using the same rich mocha ink, double stamping each to get a deep, crisp impression. For this card, I am making a thank you card. I added two sentiments here. The first line reads thank you, and the second line reads friend. Together, they read thank you, friend. Now, just like I did on my previous card, I stamped the word friend first using black ink. I covered the area for the thank you sentiment with a post it note while stamping, and once I was happy with the proper stamping on that, I removed the post it note and used lumberjack plaid to stamp the thank you sentiment right above it. If you're not completely confident about stamping two different sentiments in separate colors at the same time, don't worry, you can always stamp them one at a time. It's a simple way to ensure accuracy without any stress. Another option is to use masking techniques. Well, either use a masking tape or even a post it tape, like I'm doing here, works perfectly fine to cover up the area that you're not stamping so you can layer your sentiments precisely where you want them to. Once I was happy with both my sentiments, I moved on to adding the stars around the sentiment for a little extra visual interest. On my previous card, all the stars were stamped in red ink, but this time I decided to stamp one of the star in black. I felt this small change added a subtle but beautiful balance to the overall color scheme on this card front, helping the elements feel more cohesive and well composed without taking away from that clean and simple look that I was going for. And here's our second background already. I carefully lifted it off the ultra sticky mat, and here's a closer look at that finished panel. You'll notice that most of the images are concentrated towards the bottom right, but don't worry, we will trim the panel later to create a more balanced and symmetrical look. With panel number 2 complete, it's time to move on to panel number 3. For this one, I did make a few changes. Well, I began by stamping my focal point image, which is this tiny, adorable highland calf, right in the center of the panel using mocha ink. I also wanted to bring in some additional elements from the stamp set to give this card a slightly different look. Now, instead of those small stars, I chose a stamp which has the star and line element and stamped it just below the focal point image using black ink for a crisp, bold effect. Now, for my sentiment, I decided to try something new and bought in a different stamp set. This is the Birthday Bliss stamp set from the September 2025 card kit by Simon Says Stamp. It's filled with some gorgeous birthday sentiments, and I chose love to you on your birthday sentiment for this card. I stamped it in the same lumberjack plaid distress ink right beneath the black star and line element, creating a nice layered look while keeping the design super clean and simple. The reason I chose to use a completely different stamp set for my sentiment was to show you that how easy it is to mix and match products from your own stash to create unique looks. Now, once the sentiment was stamped, I wanted to tie the design together a bit more, so I added another star and line element just below the sentiment. This helped create a cohesive, balanced look across the card. And just like that, all three of our backgrounds are complete. I absolutely love how these panels turned out. Honestly, I'm really enjoying this color palette, the super clean and simple look that it creates. And now it's time to start assembling them onto card bases. Before we do that, I wanted to give the panels a little extra dimension. For this, I'm using the new A2 postage rectangles die. I have some red cardstock panels that I'll trim using the second largest rectangle die, which will create a lovely framed backing for each of those stamped panels. You could definitely turn these panels into shaker cards or simply adhere them directly onto red card bases, but I thought that the postage frame would add a nice extra little detail to these otherwise super clean and simple cards. Off camera, I went ahead and cut two of those postage frames from red cardstock to match the first two panels. For my third panel, I decided to trim it using a slightly smaller postage rectangle to create a proportionate frame for that design. Now it's time to assemble the cards. For the first two cards, I adhered the stamped white panels onto the red postage rectangle panels using liquid glue. For my third card, I added a little bit of dimension by adhering the white panel onto the red 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel using foam tape. I then used foam tape to adhere the first two panels onto white top folding A2 size card bases. The third panel already had that extra dimension from the foam tape, so I used liquid glue to adhere it to our card base. You'll notice that not only do the cards share the same color palette, but their overall designs are quite similar too, including a subtle dimension added by a single layer of foam tape under each of the panels. Here's a closer look at the finished card. I'm honestly so happy with how they turned out. I hope you enjoyed seeing how easy it can be to create clean and simple card designs using just a few supplies from your stash. Whether you stick with one focal point image or mix things up with multiple stamps and sentiments, the possibilities are endless. Don't forget, it's Stamptember, a month long event celebrating stamping hosted by Simon's Stamp. There are so many new products, fun collaborations, giveaways, and endless inspirations from talented designers, perfect for sparkling your creativity this month. I'd love to hear from you. Do you prefer leaving your cards clean and simple, or do you like adding that extra hint of colors and layers? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. All the supplies that I used to create these cards will be listed down in the description box below, along with the links to other products from this latest new release of Stamptember. Please know that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm sharing a fun fair themed card that's not only filled with playful die cuts but also doubles as an interactive easel card, perfect to display for a cheerful fairground scene. I'll be working with supplies from the Simon's Stamp September 2025 Birthday Blitz card kit. And well, the best part, there's no stamping involved in this project. It's all about die cutting and paper piecing. This card was inspired by, well, the Washington State Fair that's happening right now here in Washington, celebrating 125 years of unforgettable memories and beloved traditions. Now, for our card today, I'll be using two dies from the September 2025 card kit, the Ferris wheel and the pop and corn. The kit includes four dies, but I will be using just these two today. I thought they were a perfect match for creating a fairground scene. As a kid, I loved going to the fair, though the Ferris wheel wasn't really my thing. I always have been a little scared of heights, but popcorns, that's a must have along with cotton candy. The pop and corn die set creates a classic striped popcorn container, complete with fluffy popped kernels and a circle accent on the front, which would be perfect for adding sentiments, logos, or any decorative details. Now, this is, I feel, a very versatile set that would work beautifully for movie night cards, party decors, or even can be used as gift card holders. Next, we have the Ferris wheel die set, which includes all the pieces you'll need to build a layered Ferris wheel with a sturdy base. You'll find the wheel itself along with those tiny little cars that you can cut out with any cardstock colors that fit your theme. There's even a sweet little heart die that you can add to the center of the Ferris wheel for an extra touch of charm. With both the dies done, which will be the focal point of our card, for my background, I decided to go with pattern paper instead of usual solid cardstocks. I chose the Simple Stories Fun Times pattern paper, which was also included in the kit. This collection is filled with bright, playful designs that are perfect for party or birthday themed cards. Honestly, it was really hard for me to pick just one paper because every sheet is in this pack is absolutely gorgeous. To save a bit of time, I pre-cut all the little pieces using a mix of fun, colorful cardstocks. Some of them are from the kit itself, while the Ferris wheel cards here you see are cut from Sizzix cardstocks. That bold red you see on the heart and the popcorn container is from Your Paper Insider. I really enjoy mixing different cardstocks and pulling out supplies from my stash when I create. It's a great way to use up all the products that often get tucked away and forgotten. Let's start assembling the Ferris wheel first. Since this project is an easel card, the only part of the die cut will actually be adhered to the card base is the lower portion of these dies, while the rest will hang slightly over the edge. To make sure that the Ferris wheel was nice and sturdy, I cut both the triangular base and the large circle twice from grey cardstock. then layered them together. Well, if you feel your cardstock is a lighter weight cardstock, I would recommend cutting it out thrice using the same colored cardstocks. Now, for the cars, I went with some soft pinks and teals, which is not a color combination that I have ever tried before, but I'm really liking this really soft color on the Ferris wheel. I finished it off by adding the little heart in the center, and for that extra sparkle, I decorated the cars and the heart with some glittery stickers. To adhere all of these little pieces, I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Positively Perfect Craft Glue. This has quickly become one of my favorite adhesives. Usually, I would use the Barely Arts glue, but this is now something that I often reach out for. Now, it comes in two sizes. We have a zero point 0.5 ounce bottle and a larger 2-ounce bottle, and features an ultra precise tip, which I especially love when working with tiny die cut pieces like this. It allows you to apply just the right amount of glue exactly where you need it. Plus, it dries quickly to clear matte finish so that your designs shine out without any distracting glossy glue marks. Once the Ferris wheel was completed, I moved on to assembling the popcorn basket with its fun layered popcorn kernels. I started by adhering the red strip piece onto the white base of the bucket, then layered the popcorn kernels cut from two different shades of yellow cardstock. Now, there is really no right or wrong way to arrange them. I simply added little drops of glue and stacked the kernels on top of each other until I liked the look of it. I then attached the white circle piece to the center of this popcorn basket. Now, whether it's a movie night or a day at the fair, it's just isn't complete without a big basket of popcorn. I personally love having one in my hand whenever I go for a movie night or to the fair. Let me know in the comments below what's your go to popcorn flavor. Do you prefer classic salted or are you all about the cheesy, buttery goodness? After assembling all the pieces of the popcorn bucket, I added some sparkly stickles along the edges of the popcorn kernels as well for a fun finishing touch. With both the focal point elements complete, it's time to move on to our background. I love how gorgeous these are. You could use them individually as well on your card fronts. Well, choosing the background paper was definitely a tough decision because I loved every single design in this pack. And also, well, this is a double-sided cardstock pattern paper. I generally don't like using these pattern papers because the designs are so beautiful that I don't want to miss out on what's behind this beautiful pattern. Well, in the end, I went with this dark pattern paper sheet featuring fun, randomly scattered, colorful polka dots. Now, since the sheet is 6 by 8 inches, I trimmed it down to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, which is perfect size for a standard A2 size card front. For our easel card itself, you'll need a top folding card base. I will be using a 100-pound Nina Solar White cardstock here, so it's really nice and sturdy, strong enough to hold all the pieces in place when the card is on display. To create our easel, I bought the card base to my score tool and scored the front panel at 2 inches from the bottom edge. I use my bone folder to create the score line. Make sure you're not heavily pressing down your bone folder. You don't want to create a very evident looking crease on this panel. Once my score line was in place, I folded the panel along the score line inward using my bone folder. And just like that, we have the base of our easel card. Now, you could choose to score it closer around the 1 inch mark, but since I had two large focal point elements and planned to attach the Ferris wheel, which is more of an open design rather than a solid one, I decided to keep the easel base a bit larger than usual for extra support. Now, you can also score the pattern paper at the 2 inch mark, but that often leaves a crease running through the design. Instead, I trimmed the pattern paper at 2.5 inch line, 2 inch line, giving me two separate panels. I adhered them to the card base with liquid glue, and once the card was open, the background looks absolutely seamless. Now that the card base and the background were fully prepared, it was time to start assembling all the little elements and bring the card front to life. I began by arranging the two main focal points, the Ferris wheel and the popcorn bucket, on the card to see how they would sit together. You could absolutely choose to create this on a larger A7 card base, which would give you more space for these sizable elements. That would make it easier to fit everything without worrying about any overlap. But I wanted to show you that even with these larger pieces, a standard A2 card base works beautifully. With a little careful planning, you can create fun layered design that fits perfectly while still keeping all your focal elements prominent and eye-catching. I started by adhering the Ferris wheel first. When working with an easel card, it's really important to pay attention to where you place your glue. You only want the adhesive on the lower portion of the element below the 2-inch score line. If the glue is applied too high, it can cause the top portion of your image or sentiment to stick to the low portion of the card, which will prevent the easel from standing up properly. To give the Ferris wheel extra strength and stability, I had prepped the triangle base and the wheel using two layers of the cardstock. This ensures that though much of the Ferris wheel isn't directly glued to the background, it remains sturdy and secure. Once the Ferris wheel was in place, I positioned the popcorn bucket. You'll notice that part of the bucket extends slightly beyond the edge of the card base. That's okay because we can trim it later to create that seamless look. This step ensures that everything fits perfectly into your standard A2 size envelope while still maintaining that playful layered dimension of the card. By carefully arranging and adhering each of these elements, I was able to create a balanced interactive design where both the focal point stands out and the overall scene truly captures that fun fair atmosphere. Once all the main elements were in place, it was time to focus on adding the sentiments to really bring this card to life. I started with a pattern paper that already had some fun pre printed phrases. From that sheet, I selected the words Admit One and carefully fussy cut them using my scissors. I then positioned and adhered these just below the Ferris wheel on the easel base. I made sure it slightly overlapped that popcorn bucket as well, which helped create a sense of continuity and more seamless, cohesive look across the card. I use some foam tape to pop these little sentiment strips, and well, this small little step really helps tie different elements together so everything feels like part of the same playful fairground scene. Once those little sentiments were in place, now I went on to cut out the main sentiment of our card front, which is the birthday sentiments. Now, for those, I turn to the Simon Says Stamp Birthday Easy Strip sentiment sheets. Again, these both were part of the card kit. These sheets come in both black and white options, but for this project, I chose the white strips. Well, you could definitely use your paper trimmer to trim out these pieces or sentiment strips, but I find using the coordinating dies so much more easier. Now, it ensures that all your sentiment strips are perfectly aligned and uniform, which can be tricky when you're dealing with small pieces by hand. Even better, the new Stamp Timber collection includes the Easy Strip banner die, which cuts out the entire panel at once and gives you a beautiful banner edge on both sides of your sentiment strip. It is such a time saver and it makes arranging your sentiments so much more simpler. Once cut, I store all those little extra sentiment strips in small pocket. So I always have a ready supply of birthday phrases for my future projects. The best part about this particular birthday sentiment strip is that it also has phrases which includes belated happy birthday. For this card, I chose three strips that says cheers to a very happy birthday, and well, those two strips I adhere directly onto the Ferris wheel. For my third strip, I have the sentiment that says it's time to party. Now, the sentiment strips that are arranged here on the Ferris wheel I feel that gave it a bit of a layered and festive look. To add a playful surprise element, I cut the third sentiment strip which says it's time to party and tucked it at an angle inside one of the popcorn kernels. I love how these little touches gives your card that extra dimension and personality, making it feel really interactive and whimsical, perfect for a fair themed design. With all the elements in place, we now have a vibrant polka dot background, two large focal point images, and some fun sentiments. Our card front is complete. But to make the easel function properly, we need to add support on the inside of the card. To do this, I cut a small strip of cardstock from that gorgeous green pattern paper and adhered it along the base of the inside of the card. This alone is enough to hold the easel in place, but I like to be sure that it is sturdy enough to stand on its own when displayed. So I added two strips of black cardstock on top of the green strip. The extra lift from the layered black strips gives the easel the perfect support, ensuring that it stays upright without tipping over. Once all the cardstocks and the pattern paper pieces were in place and secured, I trimmed off the excess and allowed the glue to fully dry before testing the easel mechanism. And just like that, our whimsical, magical birthday card is complete. It fits perfectly into your standard A2 size envelope and can be displayed, showcasing all the fun, fair themed elements we carefully assembled. And that's it. Our fun, fair themed easel card is all done, and I absolutely love how this turned out. Can you believe it? This is all die cutting, fuzzy cutting. There is no stamping whatsoever on this card front. From the vibrant polka dot background to the interactive Ferris wheel and the playful popcorn bucket, every element comes together to create that whimsical scene that's perfect for celebrating birthdays or any special occasions. I really enjoyed mixing pattern papers, colorful cardstocks, and different dyes to bring this card to life, and I hope you can see just how much fun it is to layer and piece everything together. Easel cards are such a fun way to make your creations interactive, and they are perfect for displaying on a desk or a shelf. The trick is in creating a strong, sturdy base, and the little details like layering the cardstock for support really make a difference in how well the card stands. I also loved adding the sentiments in the playful spots like tucking one inside the popcorn kernel. It adds that extra bit of surprise and charm that makes this card feel special and unique. I hope this tutorial inspires you to try your own interactive designs and experimenting with mixing pattern papers, die cuts, and fun embellishments. Remember, it's all about letting your creativity shine, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. Even the small touches like adding sparkly stickers or layering a few colors of cardstock can elevate your project and make it feel magical. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching today's video. All the supplies that I have used here will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Well, if you love stamping and stenciling, you're going to enjoy today's video. I am sharing a very clean and simple and elegant card design that's perfect for mass producing in a variety of different colors. I added just a touch of dimension here, though you can easily keep it as a flat single layer card. With a fresh pink and green color combination, a minimal sentiment, and some playful splatters, let's take a closer look at the card that we created today. We are going to begin today's project with this absolutely gorgeous stamp and stencil combo set. Not only does it come with these two products, but it also has a coordinating die as well. Together, they are part of the Altenews Craft Your Life project kit, which was the Flourishing Garden. Now, this is a beautifully designed kit. Inside, you get a stamp set, coordinating die, a layering stencil, and an embossing folder, all of which give you endless possibilities for creating unique floral cards. For the card we are working on today, I'll be focusing mainly on the stamp and stencil combo. Now, what's great about the stamp set is that along with that beautiful floral image, we have 28 different sentiments, everything from sweet everyday messages to more heartfelt notes. So you'll always have the perfect phrase to go for your cards. Now, if you pick the coordinating die, you'll find that it not only cuts out that entire floral cluster, but also the four big words. We have the just a note, big hugs, friend, and greetings. This can be paired with all of those little sub sentiments that you saw there on the stamp set. You could cut them out in little sentiment strips and create beautiful sentiments or arrangements on your card front. Then we have the six layering stencils that is included in the kit. These are absolutely brilliant for building up depth and dimension on your floral images, making it look beautifully shaded without requiring any advanced coloring techniques. Of course, if you prefer other coloring mediums, this set works beautifully with your alcohol markers, watercolors, or even colored pencils. For my project today, though, I'll be using the coordinating stencils since they allow me to get a clean, crisp, and polished finish with minimal effort while still looking very detailed and professional. It looks like I may have lost a bit of footage here, but what I did was stamped a portion of that large floral image onto a white cardstock panel measuring 4 by 5 and quarter inches, which is slightly smaller than a standard A2 size card base. I only stamped part of the floral cluster and intentionally left some blank space on the top left corner. That's where we'll be placing our sentiment. Now, for the sentiment, I chose the phrase, I will always be there for you from the Alluring Orchids stamp set. Before adding any color to the flowers, I went ahead and stamped the sentiment in that open space. Both the floral image and the sentiment were stamped with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and then heat embossed using clear embossing powder to give them a more crisp and raised finish. Now, to make sure that my sentiment is always perfectly aligned, I like to use my Simon's Stamp Grid Transparency Sheet. I first place my panel onto my Altenew stamp wheel and then I will have my grid transparency sheet. This is such a handy tool. It not only helps you stamp your sentiments in straight line, but it also divides your card front into quadrants. That makes it easier to position both the focal point image and the sentiment in a balanced way, giving your design a more polished look every time. Once I'm happy with the positioning of my sentiment, I bring down the door of my stamp wheel and pick it up. At this point, I can remove the grid transparency sheet and stamp the sentiment directly onto the card front. If you'd like to be extra certain about the placement, you can actually stamp over the transparency sheet before committing to the cardstock. This way, you know that your sentiment will be exactly where you want it. Now, since I will be heat embossing, I prep the area by dusting it with my anti-static powder tool. This helps prevent stray embossing powder from sticking where it shouldn't be. For stamping, I used my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a pigmenting perfect for embossing because it stays wet long enough for the embossing powder to adhere. Once I was done stamping, I then sprinkled on my Simon's Stamp Clear embossing powder and tapped off the excess and then heat set it with my heat gun. A little tip that I always like to follow is to let your heat gun get good and hot before bringing it to the paper. This helps the embossing powder melt quickly and evenly while reducing the chances of the cardstock warping. Now that we've got our sentiment and focal point image beautifully stamped and heat embossed, it's time for my favorite part, which is adding color to the stunning floral design. Now, coloring really brings these images to life, and today I'll be doing that with the stencils and some absolutely beautiful inks. Now, whenever I'm ink blending, I like to work on my magnetic glass surface by Glassport Studios. It's a total game changer because it comes with those strong magnets that hold your cardstock and stencil securely in place. This means no slipping, no shifting, and I can really focus on getting smooth and even blends. I'm starting with stencil layer number one. Now, this set includes six stencils in total, and That might sound a little intimidating at first, but trust me, it's actually very easy to work with. These stencils are numbered and alignment points are very intuitive, so it doesn't take long to figure out how each one layers on top of the stamped image. Layer number one allows you to add the base color to all the open surfaces on the petals. Originally, I was planning on creating a warm, sunny palette with yellows and oranges for the flowers, but as I looked at the design, I decided to go with the pinks instead. I just felt like the softer yet vibrant pink tones would give the card a fresh, elegant look, especially paired with green leaves. Now, to keep my card panel clean while blending, I added a few post it notes along the edges of the stencil. This is such a simple trick, but it really saves you from accidentally brushing ink where you don't want it to. For my inks, I'm using the Simon's Stamp Positively Saturated Ink Collection. I began with the shade Sweets, which is this beautiful, delicate light pink. I blended that softly through stencil number one, covering all of the open floral areas. This shade acts as a base color and sets the tone for the entire bouquet. Because the stencils are clearly marked, it's easy to layer multiple shades to build depth. Once I had the first layer done, I moved on to stencil number two, where I added this shade Taffy. Now, this is much more vibrant, bold pink that really makes the petals pop. You'll start to see the flowers take shape as the layers build, and that's one of the most satisfying part of working with these layering stencils. Now, if you look closely at the stamp set, you'll notice there are actually two distinct flower types. Now, this gives you an option to mix and match the color palettes, maybe make one type pink and other yellow, or even experiment with completely different hues. But for this card, I wanted a more cohesive look, so I stuck with the pinks for all of my flowers. For the more detailed stencil layers, I reached out for my mini ink blending brushes. These are great for getting into those tighter areas and keeping the detail crisp. That said, if you only have larger blending brushes in your stash, don't worry, they work perfectly too. In fact, I'll also show you how I used my larger ink blending brush when working on the foliage to demonstrate how easy it can be even in smaller spaces. Speaking of foliage, once the flowers were finished, I shifted my focus to the leaves and flower centers. For those, I used two complementary shades from the same ink collection. We have Perfection, which is a lighter, fresher green, and Pine, which is a dark, rich green. Layering the two gives such a lovely depth to those leaves and it creates that realistic shaded look without needing markers or any paints. I applied these with the larger ink blending brushes, and as you'll see, it works beautifully even in areas where the spaces are a bit tight. By the end of the stage, the card already starts to look dimensional and polished, all thanks to those layering stencil system. Now, it's such a fun process to see each step add a little more detail until the full bouquet comes together. And with that, our floral panel is complete. Just look at how gorgeous it turned out. The combination of the vibrant pinks against that bold, fresh green really makes the whole image pop. It's bright, elegant, and full of life, and it immediately gives your card front such a stunning focal point look. To add just a touch of detail, I bought in a brown shade of the Spectrum Noir alcohol marker and added a few tiny dots and dabs to the flower centers. This little step may seem minor, but it gives the flowers little extra dimension and a more natural finish, making them feel that much more realistic. At this point, the card could easily be considered finished. You could simply adhere the panel to a card base and call it done. But I decided to take it a step further and add a little bit of splatter detail. Because let's be honest, splatters always add so much more character to a card design. Now, since my sentiment is small and delicate, I didn't want any paint drops to accidentally cover the words. To protect it, I used a small sticky note to mask the sentiment area. Once that was covered, I placed the panel inside my splatter box to contain the mess and then added some random black watercolor splatters across the card front. I kept them light and scattered for this card, but you can definitely adjust the intensity to fit your style. Go heavier for a bold, artsy look, or lighter for a more subtle, delicate finish. The beauty of splatters is that there's no right or wrong way to do it, they always look fun and unique. When I was done, I carefully lifted the panel out of the box and set it aside to dry completely. It's important to let your watercolor splatters dry on their own to avoid smudging. Once dry, I gently peeled off that sticky note mask using a pair of reverse tweezers, which help avoid fingerprints or accidentally tearing the paper. At this stage, our card panel is ready to be mounted onto a card base, and we are left with a floral card that's clean, colorful, and full of little details that make it extra special. Once my panel was completely dry, I flipped it over and added foam tape to the back. I almost always like to include some kind of pop and dimension on my designs. It gives the design more presence and makes it feel finished. The only time I skip foam tape or dimension is when I'm intentionally creating a true single layer card, which for me doesn't happen very often. After adding the foam tape, I removed the backing and carefully adhered the panel onto a top folding white card base. That little bit of lift makes such a big difference. It frames the floral panel beautifully and adds such a polished look to our card. And with that, here's a look at our finished card. I absolutely love how this design came together. The bold, vibrant pinks paired with the rich greens create such a striking focal point. The heat embossed sentiment adds that touch of elegance, while the soft shading from the stencils gives the flowers so much depth and dimension without requiring hours of coloring. The little details like the alcohol marker dots in the flower centers and the playful watercolor splatters really bring the whole card to life. What I especially love about this project is how versatile this design is. You could recreate the same design in so many different color palettes, and because the stencil layers are so beginner friendly, this card is perfect for mass producing when you need a stack of handmade cards ready to go. I hope this project inspired you to pull out your stamps and stencils and give this technique a try. I will have all the supplies that I used here listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links will be affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today's card project is inspired by a card that I created a few days back, but with a fun little twist. Actually, it's with a wobble. I'll be making a very clean and simple birthday card using an action wobble to add some fun, playful, interactive element to our card. I'll be working with supplies from the Simon's Stamp September card kit. If you haven't seen it yet, I do have a full unboxing video. Well, that card kit is no longer available, but you could definitely purchase these individual items from the kit. I will be using the Birthday Bliss stamp set, which is a very cheerful one. It has this happy sun, a fluffy cloud, some sweet little flowers, little heart accents, and even a striped path that can double as a hill or be transformed into a water stream. The sentiments are clean and simple and versatile, making them perfect for your birthday cards. Now, I actually created this card earlier a couple of weeks back using only the stamping from this set, and that's the design I'll be drawing inspiration from today. But instead of using the hill, I will be turning that striped pattern into a water stream and featuring the adorable rubber ducky die as the main focal point of our card and bringing it to life with the action wobble. This little duck die is actually made up of four separate pieces, which gives you flexibility to add fun details when you're assembling it. The best part is that all of these pieces are already detabbed, so you won't have to have the fuss with trimming or snipping those extra tab. It really makes the whole process much more easier and saves you a lot of time. Now, before I start putting the duck together, I wanted to focus on the background, which is going to set the scene of our card. Just like I did with my earlier projects, I'll begin by stamping all of the sky elements. We have the sun and the clouds. I placed an A2 size card panel onto my Altenew stamp wheel, and this will make my stamping process a lot more easier and precise. For the sun rays, I chose this absolutely gorgeous orange shade called Sherbet from the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated In collection. I really love how vibrant and fresh this color looks, especially for cheerful birthday cards. All of the inks that I'll be using today are from the same Positively Saturated Ink collection, and I'll make sure to leave links to each one of these colors down in the description box below in case you'd like to check them out. Now, since many of these images in the set are solid stamps, I always like to double stamp them. This little step makes such a big difference. It really deepens the color, fills in any lighter spots, and gives you a beautiful crisp image without stray or splotchy marks. Once the rays were done, I moved on to the center of the sun. For this, I used the color Zest, which is a gorgeous bright yellow. Now, because the center of the sun is large, solid stamp, I paid extra attention here. I wanted the color to look smooth and even with that perfect bright pop in the middle of the rays. After a couple of stampings, I was really happy with how it turned out, and it gave me a bold, happy sunshine look that I was going for. Well, I left it here as is with the stamping. You could also use light ink blending around these rays just in case. Next, it was time to stamp the clouds. I personally love designing with odd numbers, be it with stamped images or even sequin mix. It just gives the card a more balanced and pleasing look. That's, well, a personal preference. So I decided to stamp three clouds across the top portion of the panel. For these, I used this shade called Twilight, which is a pretty soft blue. I overlapped a couple of them slightly so they would look a little bit of natural, and I placed the third one towards the upper left corner, tucked right over the sun just a little bit. Now I feel this layering adds more dimension and interest to an otherwise very simple look. Again, you will see this is a solid stamp, so I did stamp the first cloud twice. And for the second cloud, I stamped it once just to give that little bit of color contrast. Once I had the sun shining and the clouds floating happily across the sky, I was ready to move on to the next part of my background, which is the water stream. Now, in my previous card, I used the same striped stamp to create a hill, but here we'll be creating a water stream for our little rubber ducky. Now, this is where the scene will start to tie together and make a perfect home for our little rubber ducky. Here's a little tip that really helps when you're working with the ultra sticky mat on the stamp wheel. Sometimes it can be tricky to remove your cardstock panel without bending it or leaving little creases behind. What I like to do is grab one of my pointy craft tools, sometimes like a craft pick or even a precision tweezer, and gently slide it under one corner of the panel. Once you've lifted that corner, the rest of the panel comes off so much more easily. You can just peel it away slowly, and it saves you from tugging or pulling too hard on your cardstock. Now, for the next step, I had to make a small adjustment. The striped stamp that I'm using for the water stream didn't quite fit well inside the space of my stamp wheel when the panel was placed straight. To make it work, I just tilted my panel at a slight angle so that the stamp would align exactly the way I wanted. It's a quick little workaround, but it did the job. If you happen to have the Altenew stamp wheel, you won't need to do this. That platform is a lot larger than the one that I'm using right now. For the water feature, I wanted to bring in a different tone of blue. Since I had already used a soft twilight shade for my clouds, I decided to go with something brighter and bolder to really make the stream stand out. I chose the color Cadet, which is such a rich and vibrant blue. To get that beautiful crisp impression, I stamped the image twice. Double stamping really helps intensify the color and gives you a more smooth and solid look. As I worked on the scene, you'll notice that there's a little depression or a dip on the left hand corner of the water stream tucked just underneath the sun. Now, that's actually perfect spot for where our rubber ducky is going to sit. It creates a natural resting place in the design, and it also helps anchor the focal point of the card while keeping the whole layout balanced. And we also have enough space to stamp our sentiment. Now that our stamping is done, I will go ahead and prep my little rubber ducky focal point. For my little rubber ducky, I decided to use up some scrap pieces of cardstock by Your Paper Insider. I love reaching out for scraps for small die cuts like these, and it's a great way to use every bit of paper, and it adds variety to your projects without cutting into a full sheet. For the duck's body, I picked out a bright, cheerful yellow cardstock. For the beak, I went with a fun, vibrant orange. And for the eyes, I chose a smooth black cardstock so the details would really stand out. I ran all the pieces along with the dies through my Spellbinder's Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and out came these adorable little parts ready to be assembled. Now, here's a quick tip: the beak and the eye pieces are super teeny tiny. So, once they are cut, make sure you place them somewhere safe, like in a little dish, a magnetic tray. Here, I kept them on my panel so that they don't get lost while you're working on other elements. They're easy to misplace on a busy desk, and I have definitely had to search for tiny pieces more times than I'd like to admit. Well, to add a little extra depth to the duck, I bought in slightly brighter shade of yellow called citrine. Using a blending brush, I lightly shaded around the parts of the body and also added a touch of shading to the wing. Now, the difference is very subtle, almost so soft that it barely shows up here on camera, but in person, it makes a world of difference. That hint of shading gives the duck a little more dimension and prevents the yellow from looking too flat, making the focal point feel more lively and realistic. Here's a closer look at our little duck. Doesn't he look absolutely adorable? I just love how bright and cheerful he turned out, and he fits perfectly into that little dip in the water stream that we stamped earlier. It almost feels like that space was made just for him. Now, at this stage, you could absolutely go ahead and adhere the duck directly onto the card front as your main focal point. That would still make it for a sweet, clean, and simple design, but I wanted to take it a step further and add just a touch of fun and surprise. Instead of using regular foam tape for dimension, I reached out for my action wobble. This way, the duck not only pops up from the card but also has that playful interactive element that makes this whole design extra playful. Now, before adhering the duck with the action wobble, I decided it was perfect time to stamp my sentiment. I chose the one that says love to you on your birthday. I stamped it in crisp bold black using VersaFine Onyx black ink. This ink is one of my favorites for sentiments because it captures all the fine details of lettering and gives it such a rich dark impression, perfect for your clean and simple cards like these. Once the sentiment was in place, I felt like the card could use a hint of sparkle to bring everything together. I grabbed my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pen and brushed over the stamped elements. We have the sun, the clouds, and even the water stream. The shimmer is subtle but catches the light beautifully when you tilt the card, adding a magical finishing touch without overwhelming the clean design. Of course, if you prefer to keep things minimal, you could definitely skip the glitter and leave it as a pure clean and simple card. But personally, I love a little sparkle on my projects. It's that extra details that makes the whole scene feel bright and joyful. I would either use this glitter brush pen or add some sequences to make the shine and sparkle stand out on my card projects. Once I finished adding glitter to all of the stamped elements, I couldn't resist bringing some sparkle to the duck as well. I brushed a little shimmer onto his wing and even his beak, and well, oh my goodness, it added such a sweetest touch. Now, when you tilt the card to light, you can really see that beautiful glimmer catching the surface. It's always a little tricky to capture the shine properly on camera, but trust me, in real life, it looks absolutely stunning and gives the whole panel a beautiful, polished, and magical look. With all the individual elements ready, it was time to bring everything together and assemble the main focal point. For this card, I wanted the duck to have fun, interactive features, so instead of popping him up with a regular foam tape, I decided to use this action wobble. Now, if you've never used these before, these are basically like little plastic springs that make your die cut pieces wiggle and wobble when you tap them. Super fun for kids, cards, and playful designs like this one. Now, before adhering this action wobble piece, I thought that my little duck needs to be a little more sturdier to move around and wobble around on this card front. So I went ahead and cut the body of the bird again using the same yellow cardstock and stuck it on top of each other just to make this whole image a lot more sturdy. Isn't he absolutely gorgeous? Well, now we can finally stick our action wobble on our little rubber ducky. These are really easy to work with because they already have adhesive on both sides. So you don't need to mess with any liquid glue or try to figure out how to secure them. You just need to peel off the backing, stick one side to your die cut and the other side to your card panel, and you're good to go. Another great thing is that these action wobbles come in different sizes, so you can pick one that works best for your project, whether it's a larger image like a balloon or a smaller one like this little duck. Well, I'll make sure to link a few of my favorite sizes and brands of these little action wobbles down in the description box below. I first peeled off the adhesive backing from one side of the action wobble and attached it right in the center of my little rubber ducky. Now, before committing to the placement and positioning him on the card panel, I took a moment to test the placement. I always like to check and make sure that the focal point is sitting exactly where I want it to, especially when using something interactive like this one, because once it's stuck down, it's not easy to move or remove. This adhesive is really strong. Now, after adjusting and making sure that the position was just right, I removed the adhesive from the back of the spring and pressed the rubber ducky firmly onto the panel. Now, once he sits in place, take a look at how adorable he looks there. He's absolutely cute and adorable with that little bit of wobble element. This otherwise clean and simple card instantly transforms into something playful and full of personality. I love how it adds a fun little surprise to your card fronts. And honestly, it's not only the kids who will appreciate this kind of detail, even us adults enjoy these sweet interactive touches on our birthday cards, don't we? It's such a joyful little feature that makes the card feel extra special. Now that the card front is completely finished, the final step is simply mounting it onto a card base. I chose a soft gray top folding card base which adds just the right amount of contrast while keeping the overall design clean and elegant. I adhered the panel down using liquid glue, which is my go-to step for this step because it gives me that extra few seconds to adjust and make sure everything is perfectly aligned before it sets. And just like that, our birthday card came together in no time. What I really love about this project is how it started with an inspiration from a very clean and simple design that we created using just stamping. With just a few little extra steps, we were able to elevate that simple idea into a fun, interactive card, which not only looks beautiful but also has that playful wobble feature to make it extra special. It is such a great reminder that even the simplest designs can be transformed into something unique and gorgeous with just a little twist. And that finishes up today's project. I just love how this card turned out. The sunshine, the clouds, the little water stream, and of course, our adorable rubber ducky on the action wobble. It's clean and simple at its core, but that playful moment adds such a fun surprise. It's a kind of card that's sure to bring a smile whether you give it to a child or an adult. I hope this inspires you to take a simple stamped design and add your own interactive twist to it. Sometimes just one little element can completely transform the feel of your card and make it extra special. Thank you for joining me today. I will be leaving links to all of the supplies that I used down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using my link, I will get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm sharing some quick and easy tips for mass producing Halloween cards. These designs are super clean and simple because, well, yes, clean and simple Halloween cards do exist. I whipped up 4 cards in under 20 minutes using just pattern papers and a few spooky sentiments. So, if you're looking for fast, fun, and festive card ideas, this one's definitely for you. All of the supplies I'm using for today's card projects are by Cat Scrappiness, and I couldn't be more excited to share them with you. Now, I've got some brand new pattern papers on my desk here, and they are part of the new Spooky Cute Halloween collection. What makes these papers really fun is that they come with an unexpected colors, soft pinks and rich purples, which is so not a traditional Halloween color. Now, if you followed me for a while, you know pink and purple are my absolute favorite color combination when it comes to anything floral. But today, instead of florals, we are switching things up and putting that combo to work for some spooky Halloween designs. And honestly, I'm loving how different and playful they feel for this theme. Along with the papers, I'm also using a set of 4 Halloween sentiment dies, each of which comes with a coordinating shadow layer. There's Trick or Treat in 2 different font styles, a bold boo and my personal favorite, which is Let's Get Spooky. I love how striking these sentiments are on their own. They are large enough that they can easily serve as the main focal point of our card without needing much else. Well, when it comes to the actual making of these cards, the process was surprisingly quick and simple. Honestly, the trickiest part for me was deciding which pattern paper worked best with which sentiment. Once I had those pairings figured out, the rest came together in no time. In total, I created 4 cards, 2 using the purple pattern papers and 2 using the spooky cute pinks. Each card feels cohesive and still unique, and that's what makes this set of projects so much more fun. When I'm mass producing cards, I usually like to work in batches. That means I complete one step across multiple cards before moving on to the next. For example, I'll stamp several focal point images at once, then color them. Then I'll shift to creating all the backgrounds and finally prep all the sentiments together. It's an efficient process that saves time and helps keep everything consistent. But for today's project, I decided to switch things up a little and work on one card at a time from start to finish. There's something nice about slowing down and really enjoying the creative process card by card, especially when you're working with these adorable new supplies. Now, I started with the spooky, cute purple pattern paper. This sheet has such a fun collection of designs that work beautifully for Halloween, but honestly, many of them could be used year round. That playful polka dot and even the candy corn pattern paper that I'll be using today could find their way onto birthday cards or even other celebration cards. I thought that the versatility of this made them extra special. Well, from this for this particular card, I chose the pink and purple candy corn paper as my background. To pair it with, I picked out one of the trick or treat sentiment dies. I cut the shadow layer using coordinating purple cardstock so it would tie with the purple tones on the candy corn. Then for the sentiment itself, I kept things clean and crisp with plain white cardstock, which makes it pop beautifully against that background. Now I cut all of these sentiments using my Spellbinder's Platinum 6 die cutting machine. Now, adhering the tiny letters onto the shadow layer can be a little bit fiddly, but with a bit of patience, it comes together really nice. I used liquid glue for extra control and worked slowly to make sure each letter was lined up properly. Now, here I just have one layer of those letters. You could layer them up for some extra dimension. I like to use my cat scrappiness reverse tweezers, which are absolute lifesaver when handling these small die cut pieces. They really help with precision. Once the sentiment was ready, it was time to put the card together. I placed the sentiment onto the center of my candy corn background, which I had trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, that is slightly smaller than a standard A2 size card base and leaves a lovely white border peeking out along the edges. To add a little more depth, I popped the sentiment on foam tape before adhering the whole panel onto a top folding A2 size card base. For finishing touches, I reached out for my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pen and added a bit of shimmer to the sentiment. That little sparkle really elevates the otherwise clean and simple design, and just like that, the card was complete. I love how fresh and fun it looks, and with that unexpected pink and purple Halloween color palette, I am absolutely loving this design. Moving on to card number two, the process here is very similar to the first one. We will once again start by choosing the pattern paper, then move on to die cutting the sentiment, which will serve as the main focal point of our design, and finally assemble everything onto an A2 size card piece. Keeping the steps consistent makes it easy to create multiple cards without overthinking each stage. For this card, I wanted to switch up the color palette a little bit, so I reached out for the one with the spooky cute pink pattern papers. The designs on these are similar to the purple papers that I used for the first card, but the color scheme here is different. Instead of the pinks paired with the purples, this collection features pinks with pops of orange, a color combination that I have been absolutely loving this year. It feels fresh, playful, and still perfectly Halloween ready. The particular sheet that I chose for this card features the delicate white spider webs scattered across a bright pink background, with tiny little black spiders tucked in here and there. I love how whimsical yet slightly spooky it feels. I trimmed the panel down to 4 by 5 1 quarter just like I did for the first card, so that once it's adhered onto the card base, I have a crisp white border around the edges of my card base. Next, it was time to work on the sentiment. For this design, I selected the Let's Get Spooky die. To create it, I cut the shadow layer from black cardstock, which ties in beautifully with the tiny black spiders in the background. For the sentiment itself, I used plain white cardstock. The black and white combination adds a striking contrast, helping the words stand out against that busier pattern paper background while also coordinates perfectly with the details on that paper. Some parts of the sentiment cut out as individual letters while others are joined together, so adhering them does take a little bit of patience. To keep everything very neat and aligned, I once again used my reverse tweezers, and honestly, that's such a handy tool for projects like these, something that I would recommend to all you crafters. I carefully added each piece of the shadow layer using liquid glue, and once my sentiment was ready, I adhered it to the center of my spiderweb panel using foam tape. I love that bit of dimension that this adds. For the final touch, I brought out my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pen and added a light layer of shimmer over the sentiment. That little sparkle really elevates this clean and simple design and makes it feel super polished and festive. And just like that, card number two came together beautifully in no time. It's amazing how changing the color palette and the sentiment gives the design such a different personality while still keeping the process super quick and simple. Here I've got card number one and card number two that we just created together. Off camera, I went ahead and made two additional cards using the same pattern papers. For those, I paired one with the trick or treat sentiment along with that cute little ghost, and the other one has the bold boo sentiment. The process of creating these were exactly same as the steps we followed for the first two cards. Simple, quick, and so much fun. And that's a wrap up on today's card making session. We started with two clean and simple Halloween cards together, and I also shared quick peek at the additional designs that I created off camera. All four cards came together so quickly using just pattern papers and bold sentiment dies, proving that you don't need complicated techniques to make fun festive cards. What I love the most about this project is that how versatile it is. You can mix and match different patterns, swap out your sentiments, or even play around with other color combinations to make it your own. Whether you need one card or a whole batch, this process is fast, easy, and perfect for getting into the Halloween spirit. I hope today's ideas inspired you to try making some spooky, clean, and simple cards for your own. Now, all the supplies that I used in today's card making I will have links to all of those listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Well, I usually lean towards creating clean and simple cards, but every now and then I like adding an interactive element. So, for today's project, I kept the clean and simple look on the outside, but gave it a playful twist on the inside. A cheerful pop up surprise waiting to be revealed. Before we dive into the pop up mechanism, I wanted to quickly show you the products that I'll be using for this card. I have this absolutely gorgeous bundle, which is the Magnificent Magnolias set. It includes a large stamp set featuring two bare magnolia branches, five elegant script sentiments, along with smaller coordinating sentiments. I believe there are 25 or 26 smaller sentiments. The bundle also comes with matching dies, perfect for die cutting out those beautiful florals. You can either use colored cardstock or add ink blending to white die cuts to build your own stunning magnolia arrangement, complete with that bold sentiment options. Plus, the set also has an embossing folder with intricate etched designs to create three different vase styles and coordinating stencils to help color in both the stamped images, that is, the bare branches, and the embossed details. This 3D embossing folder includes three unique vase designs inspired by modern ceramics. You could use them to create a full card front paired with a sentiment or cut them out individually to build your own custom design. For today's project, I'll be using one of the smaller vases inside the card as part of the pop-up feature. To add color, I'll be using these stencils to bring the stamped magnolia branches to life, as well as the embossed vases as well. Now that I've shared all the products that we'll be working with, let's start putting our card together step by step. For the base of my project, I chose two different pieces. The first one is a light pink A2 size card base, which will serve as the foundation of our card. To go along with that, I also prepared a white card panel, which is slightly smaller than an A2 size card base. I trimmed this panel down intentionally so that once it is placed inside, we have that soft pink border framing the white insert. That little detail adds a really clean and finished look to even the inside of our card. Now, because I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to showcase a vase with flowers as the main feature on the pop up, I decided to start by cutting those elements first. Having those pieces ready ahead of time gave me a clear idea of the size and placement of the pop up stand. This step is important because before I cut the pop up mechanism itself, I wanted to be sure that I had a good sense of where the vase and the floral arrangement would sit inside the card. That way, when the card opens, the elements pop exactly where I'm envisioning them, creating that fun surprise effect. I began this step by embossing the vase. You'll notice that I only used a small piece of cardstock for this, and that was intentional. I wanted just that one specific vase design for the embossing folder. So there was no need to run a full sheet through the embossing folder. The paper I chose for this is this absolutely gorgeous paper by Your Paper Insider and has the most gorgeous wood grain texture on it. I felt like that subtle detail would really enhance the vase, giving it a look of a textured, handcrafted ceramic piece. Now, before trimming out the vase, I wanted to add a little extra depth and dimension, so I reached out for my positively saturated inks from Simon's Stamp and used a couple of shades of browns to bring in some shading. To do this, I placed the embossed piece into my sticky mat, which kept it in place while I worked with the ink blending. Then, using the coordinating stencil, I added ink blending over the vase. The stencil has two layers. The first one covers the entire vase, giving it a smooth base color, and the second adds a subtle detailing to the lower portion of the vase. For the first layer, I used a lighter shade of brown, and for the second, I deepened it with a darker brown. Together, these layers really brought the vase to life and gave it a more of a dimensional and ceramic look. Now, the cardstock that I was using wasn't particularly a heavy cardstock, and since I knew that the vase was going to be part of the pop up feature inside the card, I wanted to reinforce it so that it would be a lot more sturdier. Interactive cards require the focal point elements to be strong enough to hold their shape when they pop up. To solve this, I backed the vase with a piece of craft cardstock which is almost identical to the shade of the wood grain paper. I cut the craft piece of cardstock slightly smaller than the main vase piece so it wouldn't show around the edges. This extra layer added stability I needed, making the vase more durable to be the star of our pop up mechanism. Well, you could also use a heavyweight cardstock instead, but I love that wood grain texture on that pattern paper. That's the reason I used it for this pop up element. Now that our vase is ready, we can move on to creating the pop up stand that will hold it in place inside the card. The nice thing about this step is that there isn't a strict rule about where exactly the pop up has to go. It really depends on the look you want. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that once your focal element is attached, it should sit comfortably inside the card and not hang off the edges when the card is closed. For my card, I decided to position the pop up feature slightly towards the right hand corner. I began by measuring and marking a 1 inch section with my pencil, which gave me the width of the pop up stand. The thickness or the width of the stand can vary depending on how large or detailed your pop up element is. Since I planned to feature the vase with a couple of flowers, I knew that my element would be larger size, so I gave the stand a little extra width to provide enough support. After making the marks with my pencil, I drew two parallel lines and then carefully cut along those lines using my scissors. If you're comfortable, you can also use an X-Acto knife or a craft knife for cleaner cuts, but personally, I prefer using scissors. It feels safe and more controlled in my hands. Now, once the cuts were made, I gently pushed the little tab or flap inwards with my finger, pulling it down firmly to create a crease. This simple fold is what turns the cut into a working pop up mechanism, forming a step like platform inside the card base. That step will serve as the stand where our vase and flowers can sit securely, ready to surprise the recipient when the card is opened. Now that the pop up mechanism was in place, it was time to bring the inside of the card to life by adding the decorative elements. I already had my vase prepared earlier, so the next step was to work on the flowers that would complete the arrangement. To save some time during the filming process, I had batch produced a number of flowers in advance using the Magnificent Magnolias die set. For these, I chose a few different shades of pink cardstocks to give the florals a soft layered look. In total, I had 5 flowers ready to go, two of which I plan to use as part of the pop up feature inside the card, while the remaining three would be reserved for decorating the card front. It actually took me a little while to play around with the placement and decide exactly which flowers worked best for the inside versus the outside. Sometimes that part of the process is just trial and error, moving pieces around until the balance feels right. Once I was happy with the arrangement, I was ready to adhere the flowers to the pop up stand. But before attaching anything permanently, I decided to add the sentiment to the inside of our card. I stamped the phrase, I appreciate how you're always there for me no matter what, from the same Magnificent Magnolia stamp set. I felt like this message paired beautifully with the larger thank you sentiment that I had planned for the card front. Together, the two sentiments would create a really heartfelt message for the recipient. Now, I stamped this sentiment on the top panel using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a beautiful black crisp ink. With the sentiment stamped and the layout finalized, it was finally time to assemble the pop up elements, adhering the vase and carefully layering the flowers to complete the cheerful surprise waiting on the inside of our card. I began by applying a bit of liquid glue directly onto the pop up stand and carefully adhered the vase over it. I pressed it down gently and held it in place for a few seconds to give the glue enough time to grab and secure the piece firmly. Once I felt confident that the vase was anchored properly, I opened up the card panel and moved on to arranging the floral elements. Now, arranging the floral elements did take a little extra time and patience because I wanted to be sure that the flowers were not only adhered securely to the vase, but also positioned in a way that looked natural and balanced. At the same time, I had to pay attention to the card's dimensions as well, making sure that none of the floral pieces extend past the edges of the card base when it was closed. It was a bit of a balancing act, but once everything was in place, the arrangements started to really come together beautifully. You'll notice that only the vase itself is attached directly to the pop up feature, while the flowers appear to be floating above it. The structure comes together because the flowers are carefully glued to one another and anchored to the vase, creating an illusion of that light and airy arrangement. With that, the inside of our card panel is complete and it truly serves as a main highlight of this design. Now that the pop up feature is finished, we can move on to working onto the card front. Now, the card front that I'm creating is very much my style, clean, simple, and elegant, with a floral arrangement paired with sentiments and a few playful splatters for an added interest. I started by stamping the bare magnolia branch towards the lower portion of my panel. For this, I used Memento black ink since I knew I'd be adding color with my positively saturated inks. You could also choose to add alcohol markers if you'd prefer that coloring method. Now, once the branches were stamped, I returned the panel to my ultra sticky mat and prepared to add ink blending using the coordinating stencils. To protect the edges and prevent any unwanted ink from spreading, I carefully covered them with post-it notes. For the branches itself, I used two shades of browns, which is mocha and cappuccino, to add depth and dimension. For the leaves, I used blends of green, including pine and field, which happens to be one of my favorite combinations for coloring foliage. Even with all these precautions, a small amount of brown ink did manage to stray onto the white panel, but that's an easy fix. We can cover it up later with a focal point image or scattering of sequences or even some of the splatters that we plan to add in the background. These little oops moments often just add character, and well, if you don't like them, you there are so many different ways to hide those strays or any kind of mistakes that you create. They just give us an opportunity to layer something more extra and some more creative details onto your card fronts. Once the branches were fully colored and ready, it was time to add the sentiment. I started by placing the panel onto my stamp platform and arranging the flowers on top, just to get a sense of where the sentiments would sit visually. At this stage, the flowers weren't adhered, they were there just for reference to guide my placement of the sentiment. Now, for the sentiment itself, I chose the phrase that says thank you from the same Magnificent Magnolia stamp. And using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, I stamped the sentiment twice, which gives it a crisp and clean impression. Now, after the sentiment was stamped, I moved the panel into my splatter box to add some black watercolor splatters in a diagonal pattern. To protect the sentiment, I covered it with a sticky note so that no large blobs of watercolor accidentally landed on top of those words. While the panel was drying, I prepped the flowers for my card front. I added small pieces of foam tape to the backs of each of those flowers to give them dimension and help them stand out on the card front. I then carefully placed each flower on the branches, making sure not to cover the sentiment and ensuring that none of these flowers hung over the edges of the panel. These small touches really help bring the card front to life while keeping everything balanced and visually appealing. I like to use my reverse tweezers to hold all of these flowers in place so that I do not end up having any mess later. Now that our card front is ready, I decided to focus on finishing the inside of the card before attaching the front panel. To secure the pop-up feature inside the card, I applied liquid glue to one side of the pop-up card base and carefully aligned it along the fold of the main card base. It's important to make sure that the edges are snug and perfectly aligned so that the pop-up mechanism functions properly. Once that side was in place, I added glue to the remaining portion of the white card base and closed the card, pressing gently to ensure that both the panels adhered firmly together. I gave it a few moments to dry completely, then opened the card again to double check that everything was lined up and working as intended. With the pop up mechanism secure and the inside complete, all that is left is to attach that beautifully designed card front to the finished project. Since I had already added foam tape to the flowers to give them dimension, I simply applied liquid glue to the back of the panel and carefully adhered it directly onto the card base. To add a few finishing touches, I also help cover that small bit of stray brown ink from the ink blending. I added some little sequin mixes across the card front. And just like that, our card is complete. One of my favorite things about this design that not only is it like a pop-up mechanism, but also there is plenty of space inside right below the pop-up feature to write your personal message. It's both interactive as well as functional, making it perfect for sending heartfelt notes to someone special. And there you have it, a beautiful interactive card that's both simple and full of charm. I love how the pop up feature adds a fun surprise while keeping the overall design super clean and elegant. Now, all the supplies that I used to create this card project will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm sharing a really fun project featuring a beautiful ink blended night sky. I've been so excited to create this one because I finally caved in and picked up the all-new bundle of 8 large ink blending brushes. Now, I know I'm a little late to the party, but I'm so happy that I made this investment. I absolutely love ink blending, whether it's for creating bold backgrounds or adding color to little die cut pieces, and these brushes are truly a game changer. Along with that, I will also be showcasing an absolutely stunning sparkly glitter paper that I used to create the silhouette focal point for today's card. Let's dive right in. Here you can see the Alteneo's large ink blending brush, which comes individually packaged. Since I got the bundle, I have all 8 and look how gorgeous they are. All of these ink blending brushes were individually packed in that beautiful packaging. Now, I'll be pairing these with my dye inks, and I have been using the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks, which are my absolute favorite dye inks. Now, each of these brush measures 2 inches in diameter, giving you a wide surface area that's perfect for covering backgrounds quickly and smoothly. The bristles are super soft, and this whole entire blending brush, it's super ergonomically designed to make blending seamless while helping reduce hand fatigue. Now, that's a big plus for me since as much as I love ink blending, working on multiple panels can be a bit too tiring for my hand. The soft white bristle, it gives excellent coverage for larger areas, and they also work beautifully with stencils, which is something that I'm waiting to try out. Plus, each brush comes in its own caddy style storage pocket, which keeps them clean, organized, and prevents cross contamination with other colors. Now this isn't actually my first time trying out the Altenews ink blending brushes. I've been using their set of 16 small blending brushes for a while now, and I must say, even though they are tiny, I absolutely love them. Each of these smaller brushes measures about 1 inch in diameter and an inch and a half tall. Now, just like the larger brushes, these feature soft white bristles that make ink blending so much more easier and enjoyable. Now, I also have a third variety in my stash. This is the Altenews Mini Ink Blending Brush. I actually received this one as part of the Build a Garden set, and it has quickly become one of my favorites. Now, this mini brush can be purchased individually in a pack of 4 or even as a mega bundle of 32 if you want the whole entire collection. Now, for the smaller ink blending brushes, I do have the storage box from Altenew, which not only store all of these brushes beautifully, but can also be used to store tiny little pieces like score tape or even little die cut pieces or sentiments. I'll make sure to leave links to all these different ink blending brushes, the storage box, and a few other options from the Altenew store in the description box below so you can check them out if you'd like. Let's dive right into the ink blending process. Now, for today's project, I'm working on an A2 size white cardstock panel, and whenever I sit down to ink blend, I love pulling out my glass mat from Glassboot Studios. It really makes a huge difference. The smooth glass surface helps the brushes glide effortlessly, and cleanup couldn't be easier. A quick wipe down, and you're good to go. Now, for these inks, I am reaching out for my absolute favorites. We have the Simon Says Positively Saturated inks. These are dye inks and I adore them for their vibrancy and how beautifully they blend together. For this background, I'm going for a night sky effect. I'll be starting with carnation, which is this gorgeous rich pink. From there, I'll deepen the tones by layering multiple layers of pinks and purples, working my way from the lighter shades down to the darkest to really build up that depth and drama of the night sky. Now, since this is my very first time using the Altenew's large ink blending brushes, I'll admit I was a little cautious at first. I didn't want to overload the bristles or press too hard, but honestly, it took me only a few swipes to get the feel of it, and then blending just flowed. The brush did most of the work for me. It was super smooth, effortless, and coverage was incredible. One thing I noticed right away is how that ergonomic design is. The handle sits comfortably in the hand, and the wide 2-inch brush head gives you such a great coverage over large areas. Normally, when I'm working on multiple panels, I start to feel that strain in my wrist and shoulder. But with this brush, the pressure was so much lighter. It really reduces the fatigue, which means I can spend more time creating without any discomfort on my hand or on my shoulder. Now let's take a moment to look at the results. Just look at that absolutely gorgeous background, how beautifully it's already coming out. The transition from the pink to purple is so seamless. You can't even see where one shade ends and the next begins. Now there are no harsh lines, no patchiness, just smooth, dreamy color blending. I honestly feel like I could use this brush all day long. Making multiple backgrounds doesn't feel like a chore anymore. In fact, it was such a fun and joyful moment for me. And well, I have to admit, while I was ink blending, I kept asking myself why it took me so long to order these in the first place. This is how much I am already in love with them. Once I finished the ink blending, I went ahead and stored my brushes back into their little caddies. I really love that Altenew includes these storage pockets. It gives me peace of mind knowing that the bristles are protected and won't get contaminated with leftover ink from other colors. It also keeps everything neat and organized on my desk, which is always a plus. Now that my background is ready, it's time to add some nighttime sparkle. I place the panel into my splatter box. This is one of my favorite steps because it's where the background really comes to life. Now, for this project, I decided to go all in with shimmer. Normally, I use shimmer mist sparingly, maybe on small die cut pieces or lightly through stencils to highlight certain areas. But since I was creating a night sky, I thought, why not? Let's give the whole panel that gorgeous starry shimmer effect. So I gave the background an overall mist, and the results are magical. The fine shimmer instantly added depth and movement, almost like tiny stars scattered across the sky. To take it up another notch, I grabbed my gold metallic watercolors and added some splatters across the panel. These little flecks of golds just pop against that pink and purple, and they mimic glowing stars beautifully. It's such a simple step and it makes such a huge impact. And just look at this. Between the shimmer mist and the gold splatters, the background already looks so dreamy and celestial. I absolutely love how it turned out, and honestly, this panel could stand on its own as a piece of art in itself. For my focal point, I'm using the Pooh and Friends silhouette die by Spellbinders. And oh my goodness, I absolutely love this die. It's such a sweet design. Not only it gives you a beautiful silhouette of Pooh and his little friends, but it also creates this lovely border accent that instantly grounds the scene. Now, instead of cutting the silhouette from plain black cardstock, I decided to step it a bit further and use black glitter cardstock instead. Now, this is by Your Paper Insider, and let me tell you, this paper is fantastic. The glitter is no shed, which makes it so much more easier and cleaner to work with. You get all the sparkle without any of that glitter mess, and it adds such a gorgeous touch to any project. I trimmed down a piece of that glitter cardstock and positioned my die slightly over the bottom edge before running it through my die cutting machine. This way, the bottom edge looks like a little hill, giving the silhouette a more natural, grounded appearance against our beautiful night sky. The shimmer from the glitter paper paired with that dreamy, ink blended background will look absolutely magical, almost like Pooh and his friends are out enjoying a quiet, starry night together. Once my silhouette piece was die cut, I used my scissors to trim through the edges. Now, this will give it a nice framed look once it is mounted on that ink blended background. And well, just take a look at how stunning that shimmer looks now against that rich ink blended night sky. It absolutely sparkles like a real starry evening. Next, it was time to add the silhouette. I really wanted Pooh and his little friends to pop off that background, so instead of adhering that piece flat, I decided to give it some dimension. I added a long strip of tape along the lower edge of the panel, right where the hill portion of the silhouette will sit. That helped lift the whole entire scene and gave it more depth. Since the characters' silhouettes are quite delicate, I also tucked in a few tiny pieces of foam tape behind each of them. This step is really important. Without that extra support, the thin die cut areas can bend or sag over time. Adding those little foam squares makes the entire design feel a lot more sturdy while keeping that lovely raised dimension. And already you can see how magical this looks. The glittery black silhouette stands out beautifully against our dreamy glowing background, almost like a page straight out of a storybook. After trimming off the extra bits of the die cut that were hanging off the edges of my background, it was now time to work on our sentiment. Now, instead of stamping directly onto the background, I thought of a sentiment strip that would work beautifully here. It adds a little extra detail without taking away from the scene we've created. Since I wanted to turn this into a birthday card, I went digging through my stash. I didn't have a ready-made birthday strip, so I decided to create my own using my one of my favorite sets, which is the Always and Forever Sentiment Strip press plate and die set by Spellbinders. Now, this is such a great staple to have on hand. It comes with 16 different sentiments for all sorts of occasions, and the best part is that it includes a coordinating die so you can cut out all the strips at once. To get started, I placed my press plate onto the magnetic platform and inked it up with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Well, you also get the Better Press ink, but I have found that any ink that you have works beautifully with this system. Now, instead of using the specialty cotton cardstock that comes here with the Better Press system, I decided to use regular white cardstock for today's project, just to show you that this system not only works beautifully with any kind of inks, but also with your standard cardstock. On the lid of the platform, I adhered my cardstock panel and then I ran the entire setup through my die cutting machine exactly the same way that I would do if I was using a regular die. When I pulled out the panel, the impressions were absolutely crisp and clean. I was honestly so impressed with how well it worked. From there, I used the coordinating die to cut out the tiny little strips all at once. One thing I like to do is store those little extra strips, sentiment strips, in the small container so I always have them handy for future projects. It saves so much time when you're in middle of card making. Now for this card, I chose two strips that felt perfect for the design. Now, since I was creating a birthday card, My first sentiment was the happy birthday sentiment, and for the second card, the second strip, I used the sentiment which says from all of us. I thought that it was such a sweet fit with Pooh and his little friends on the hill, like they've all gathered to celebrate your birthday. Now, if you don't love the look of white sentiment strips standing out against the ink blended background, you could absolutely stamp your greeting directly onto the panel. A simple happy birthday or any other sentiment would blend beautifully. But personally, I really wanted those little banner edge strips. I just love how crisp white paired with a black ink creates such a striking contrast against that colorful night sky. It really helps the sentiment pop while tying the whole entire scene together. With the sentiment ready, it was time to assemble the card. Since I already added foam tape behind the silhouette to give that dimension, I didn't want to build up any extra bulk. So I adhered the entire panel directly onto the A2 size card base using liquid glue. That way, everything sits nice and flush while still keeping the focal point lifted. As for the sentiment strips, my initial plan was to place them neatly and straight across the panel. But as I was arranging them, I decided to do something a little different, not my style. Instead of perfectly aligned placement, I adhered them slightly on a diagonal. This small shift adds just enough visual interest that gives the design a very playful, less rigid feel, which I think really complements that whimsical Pooh and Friends silhouette. And just like that, the card front was complete. I love how beautifully all the elements came together, from the smooth, seamless, starry night sky created using the Altenews large ink blending brushes to the sparkly black glitter paper that makes the silhouettes shine, and finally the crisp professional look from the Better Press Letterpress sentiment strips. These tools really helped transform a simple idea into a magical card design. The brushes made ink blending so much more effortless. The shimmer and splatters brought the night sky to life, and the glitter paper gave an extra touch of sparkle, and the sentiment strips added that perfect finishing detail. I hope this project inspires you to play with your inks, experiment with your specialty papers, and try out something new with your sentiments. All the supplies that I used here will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited you're here today because we are going to dive into a really fun and slightly messy technique that's perfect for your fall cards. We will be pulling out some vibrant inks, adding a splash of water, and creating two gorgeous watercolor panels. One of the panel will serve as a base for a bold, colorful background, while the other will be used to die cut our beautiful fall leaves that really bring the season to life. I love this technique because it gives you such a playful mix of color, and no two panels ever look exactly the same. So grab your rings, your watercolor paper, and your favorite leaf dies, and let's jump right in to creating these two-in-one fall-inspired panels that will come together beautifully in today's project. For my leaves, I'm using the new Autumn Leaves die set from Simon's Stamp. It has 15 unique designs that are perfect for layered arrangements, scattered backgrounds, and even bold focal points. For the watercoloring, I'm using some gorgeous watercolor papers by Your Paper Insider. They come in large sheets, but I trimmed mine down into two 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panels, which will be perfect for card making. And for those crisp white leaves that you saw in the beginning of the video, I'll be die cutting them using the EVO bright white synthetic paper, also from Your Paper Insider. It's super soft, really smooth, and honestly one of my favorite specialty papers to work with right now. Since I mentioned earlier that this technique can get a little messy, the very first thing I want to do is protect my work surface. Now, instead of placing my watercolor panels directly on the desk, I like to set them on top of a microfiber cloth. Now, don't mind the black splotches and the absolutely worn out looking cloth. It has been absolutely loved and used many a times, but honestly, this is one of my absolute craft room essentials. Now, the cloth not only protects my surface but will also keep the panels in place while I'm working with water and ink. Next, I'll be bringing in a small plastic sheet. You can use pretty much any piece of plastic packaging you might have on hand, something from stamp sets, dies, or even clear wrap from other supplies. This is going to act as a palette for our inks and allow us to do some fun ink smooshing to create that messy organic background. The look I'm going for today is loose, colorful, and full of texture. If you're someone who prefers more controlled look, like carefully placing color where you want it to and adjusting the intensity, you could definitely use watercolors and paintbrush for this step. That method works beautifully, but for today's project, I want to show how to embrace the unexpected by letting the inks and water move absolutely freely to create natural blends and patterns. For colors, I'll be using the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks in a mix of gorgeous fall shades. I pulled together some warm yellows, oranges, and pinks along with earthy greens and browns. This palette really captures that cozy fall vibe and will work perfectly for both our background panel and the leaves we will be die cutting later on. You'll also need a spray bottle of water for this technique. That's what helps the inks move and gives you that more organic watercolor look. To start, I'm working with the lightest color here, which is yellow. On the right hand side of my workspace, I have my plastic sheet ready. I simply dab the ink directly onto the plastic sheet. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You can add just a little ink or layer it up more heavily if you want a deeper color. Once I have the ink down, I spritz it generously with water and let it spread out. This creates a watery pool of color that's perfect for transferring on our paper. Now you have two options you of applying ink to your panels. Some crafters like to press their watercolor paper facing down into the ink, but I actually prefer flipping the plastic sheet over the paper instead. This gives me a lot more control because I can see exactly how the ink is landing on the surface and where I want more or less color. I lay the plastic onto the watercolor panel, press lightly, and then lift it to reveal the beautiful wash of color underneath. Once I was happy with the look of the first panel, I repeated the same exact step for the second panel so both would have a consistent color base. Remember, no two panels will ever look identical with this method. That's the beauty of it. Each one turns out unique, and that's what makes the technique so much more fun. And here's a little tip. If you don't want to use your ink pads directly for this technique, you have so many other options. You could use your ink refills, which are a little more concentrated and will give you a deeper color, or you could even use your watercolor paints. Just add a large blob of watercolor onto your plastic sheet, spray it down with more water to get that runny consistency, and transfer it onto your watercolor panel the same exact way. Both work beautifully, and it all comes down to what supplies you already have in your crafty space. Once I was done working with the yellow, I made sure to completely clean off my plastic sheet before moving on to the next color. This step is really important because it prevents the colors from mixing on the sheet before you're ready to use them. Also helps prevent any kind of cross contamination between the colors. My next choice was a gorgeous, vibrant orange, which really brings that fall warmth to the panel. I follow the same exact technique of smushing the ink pad onto the plastic, spritzing it generously with water, and then flipping the sheet over onto my watercolor paper to transfer the color. After I was happy with the orange, I moved on to a more subtle green, then layered in some beautiful pinks and reds, and finally finished off with a rich shade of brown. All these colors together create such a perfect autumn palette, and each layer adds a new level of depth and interest to our background. Now, one tip I want to share, if you're someone who enjoys building up layers, you can definitely use a heat gun to dry your panel between each color application. Drying in between gives you more defined layered look because the next color will sit on top rather than blending in. On the other hand, if you apply a new ink while the paper is still wet, the colors will flow together and sometimes blend into completely new shades. Both results are beautiful. It just depends on what kind of look you're going for. Another option, if you find you have a lot of excess ink pooling or running in areas you don't want, is to dab it up gently with a little paper towel. Not only does it help speed up the drying process if you're in a hurry, but it can also create some really unique patterns and textures on the panel. And that's honestly the beauty of this whole messy technique. Well, there is really no right or wrong way to do it. You can experiment, mix colors, layer as much as you like, or stop whenever you're happy with the effect that you wanted. Every panel you make will turn out different, and that unpredictability is what makes it so much more fun compared to painting with watercolors and a brush, which tends to give you a more cleaner, more controlled look. This method really lets you embrace the mess, play with colors, and end up with something beautifully organic and unique every single time. Towards the end of the inking process, I felt like the panel needed just a little more depth, so I bought in a darker shade of green to finish it off. And this is exactly what I love about this technique. You can keep layering and experimenting until you're completely happy with the look. There's really no limit to how many times you can repeat the process, and every new layer adds something different. But of course, at some point, you have to decide when to stop and call it done. Once I was happy with the way both the panels looked, I placed them into my splatter box to add some extra shine and sparkle to these panels. The smooshed watercolor background already had that soft organic look, but I wanted to take it a notch and really make the panels shimmer. For this, I reached out for my Distress Spritz sprays and I used three beautiful colors. We have pickled raspberry, which is that bold, vibrant pink, fossilized amber, which is a rich golden yellow, and spice marmalade that gives a warm, glowing orange. Together, they added a gorgeous layer of shine that shifts in light and perfectly enhance the fall color palette. Now, just a little tip, make sure you give these spray bottles a really good shake before using them because the pigment tends to settle right at the bottom of the bottle. Shaking ensures that you get even distribution of shimmer with every spritz. To add even more detail, I also bought in my metallic watercolors and created splatters in gold and copper. These metallic touches catch the light beautifully and really tie the whole design together, giving the background a rich and festive feel. After all the splattering and spraying, I let the panels completely dry. Since there was quite a bit of water and multiple layers of ink on the paper, I gave them almost an hour to dry. This step is really important because you don't want to move on while the paper is still damp. You could risk smearing the shimmer or damaging your carefully built layers. Once the panels are fully dry, they are ready for the next step of the project. The next step is to take these absolutely gorgeous inked panels and start turning them into cards. Since I wanted to stay true to the fall theme, I reached out for the Autumn Leaves die set from Simon's Stamp. This set comes with three dies that together cut out a total of 15 unique leaf shapes, which gives you so many possibilities for layering, scattering, or building up focal points. For my first set of leaves, I used the EVO Bright White cardstock by Your Paper Insider. It's such a smooth, beautiful paper and it cuts like a dream. I decided to only use the larger leaves shapes because I knew I wanted just three bold leaves to be the main feature of my card front. Keeping it simple with fewer leaves really allows the background and the details to shine through without feeling too crowded. For my second set of leaves, I couldn't resist using one of the ink blended watercolor panels. Honestly, it was a really tough decision choosing which panel to keep as a whole background and which one to cut up because both of them turned out so beautifully. But I knew the leaves would look incredible with those layered colors, so well, I went for it. Unlike the white cardstock where I stuck with just the larger shapes, here I used all three dies to cut a variety of leaves. Now, because the panel had so many blended layers, we have greens, orange, pinks, yellows, and browns. The die cut leaves came out looking incredibly natural, almost like real autumn leaves you'd find outside. And those little gold splatters that we added earlier, they catch the light perfectly and add just the right amount of shine and charm to our leaves. It's such small detail, but it really makes the leaves look special and brings out a touch of elegance to the overall design. For my first card, I wanted to keep things clean and simple while still highlighting those gorgeous watercolor leaves. I started with an A2 size white cardstock panel, but before adding the embellishments and the leaves, I stamped my sentiment. I chose the Thank You for Everything sentiment from Vintage Blooms stamp set by Simon's Stamp, which was released a couple of months ago. It's such a timeless set, and the font style works beautifully with the fall theme. I stamped the sentiment towards the lower right hand corner of the panel, giving myself plenty of room to arrange the leaves along the opposite side. After stamping, I trimmed the panel down slightly to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. This slight adjustment is something I often do, but well, I often do 4 by 5 1/4, but this is a lot more smaller than that. It not only gives the design a more balanced proportion, but also leaves me with a nice border when I eventually adhere it to my canvas. Next, I bought in the beautiful watercolor leaves I had die cut earlier. I decided to place them along the left hand side of the panel, creating a cascading effect that draws the eyes from top to bottom. I scattered them randomly so the arranged leaves would feel natural, like leaves drifting down in autumn. To add dimension, I adhered some of the leaves flat with liquid glue and popped a few with thin foam squares. This mix of dimension adds subtle shadows and makes the cluster look more dynamic. Now, if you wanted, you could definitely fill the entire panel with leaves for a really bold textured background. But for this design, I chose to keep it more clean and simple side. By concentrating the leaves only on the left corner, I left plenty of negative space around the sentiment. That clean white area really makes the colorful leaves stand out and keeps the card elegant while still being playful with color. Moving on to card number two, we are going to create a card using this bold, colorful background that we created. I started with an A2 size panel, but I wanted to give it a clean framed look, so I trimmed it down using the new A2 postage rectangle die set. I used one of the smaller rectangle dies to cut out the panel, giving it a neat border. Don't worry, I'm not throwing away the outer piece of the panel. You'll see later in the video how I repurpose it for my next card. Well, for this card, I wanted to focus on the vibrant inky background. So I chose to pair it with the white EVO die cut leaves we made earlier. I used just 3 leaves to create a simple cluster that complements the colors without overwhelming them. To add my sentiments, I decided to keep it minimal and subtle, so I used thin sentiment strips. These are from the Reverse Gratitude A2 sentiment strips sheet, which is such a handy set for your thank you cards or Thanksgiving and fall theme projects. The sentiments have a black background with white text, and because they are printed on toner sheet, you can even foil them if you want a shiny metallic effect. I like to cut them into small strips and store them separately so they're ready to grab whenever I'm creating thankful themed cards. Once I had all my pieces ready, I adhered the trimmed background panel onto a top folding A2 size card base. I used foam tape to pop up this panel. I love that bold border created by trimming the panel with a smaller postage rectangle die. It really frames the colorful panel beautifully and gives the design a beautiful polished look. After that, I arranged and adhered the white leaves and added the sentiment strips carefully, placing them so that they complement the design without taking away from that vibrant, colorful background. The combination of the bright inky panel, crisp white leaves, and the sentiments creates a card that feels both bold and elegant, a perfect balance for a fall inspired thank you card. I really love how the second card turned out. It's so vibrant and cheerful, and the white leaves just pop beautifully against that colorful background. Now let's go back to our first project, the panel with the watercolor die cut leaves and the stamped sentiment. Originally, I had thought of adhering the panel directly onto an A2 size card base, but then I had a little idea. Why not use the leftover panel from card number 2 as a frame for this card front? It is such a simple way to add dimension and interest while repurposing materials that might otherwise go unused. So I added the leftover frame directly onto my card base and then adhered the main panel on top using foam tape. This creates a nice layered look and really makes the leaves and sentiments stand out. I absolutely love this technique because it's an easy way to give your cards an elevated professional feel without needing any extra supplies. It's also a great reminder that when you're working with your nested frame dies, you often end up with these beautiful frames as scraps. Don't toss them, they can be reused in so many creative ways, whether as frames, borders, or even accents for other projects. Repurposing your scraps is like this not only saves paper but also adds an extra creative twist to your card making. And there you have it, two beautiful fall inspired cards created from our inky watercolor panels and gorgeous autumn leaves. I love how the first card turned out with the clean and simple design and the clustered leaves, and the second card really shows off that beautiful, bold, colorful background with the crisp white die cut leaves. This project was such a fun way to play with inks, water, and layering, and it really shows that even a messy experimental technique can lead to such stunning results. Don't forget, you can always repurpose scraps, play with layers, and add little extra touches of metallic splatters and foiled sentiments to elevate your cards even more. I hope this tutorial inspires you to try some messy watercolor backgrounds and creative layering on your next fall cards. Now, all the supplies that I used in today's video will be listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is extra special because I'm joining a YouTube and Instagram hop where we are giving gratitude back to all the amazing content creators in our community. You know the saying, it takes a village, and well, I'm excited to be part of this hop that shines a little extra light on all our beautiful talent out there. For today's project, I am trying something brand new, using a sentiment background embossing folder to create a stunning textured backdrop and then adding lots of sparkle to make it shine. And here's the fun part, there's no stamping and no die cutting for this card. Instead, we'll be playing with some fun, gorgeous pattern papers and letting them do the magic. So let's dive in and create something beautiful together. For my background today, I'm using the new Words of Gratitude embossing folder, which I thought was absolutely perfect for this project. This is a 3D embossing folder that creates beautiful collage of thankful sentiments all arranged into a textured word background. Now this one is very similar to the birthday sentiments 3D embossing folder that came with the September card kit by Simon. Now it has beautiful, playful, heartfelt phrases that are perfect for your card fronts, tags, and party theme projects. The Words of Gratitude embossing folder not only radiates warmth and gratitude but also brings a really uplifting, positive feel to your card. I absolutely love this gratitude version of the embossing folder. It's all about kindness and appreciation. Some of the sentiments you'll see embossed in the background include a million thanks, thanks so much, you're the best, thank you, so thoughtful and wonderful, just to name a few. It really brings that heartful touch to any project. Well, for my background today, I'm using the Simple Stories Fun Times paper pad, which was part of the card kit. These pattern papers are filled with cheerful designs and playful patterns. If you're someone who loves adding color to your projects, this pack is definitely for you. Not only are the colors bright and happy, but the patterns themselves are absolutely stunning and bring so much life to your cards. For today's card, I'll actually be using two pattern papers from this pack. One will be transformed into my embossed background, and the other will serve as both my focal point and the sentiment. Like I mentioned earlier, there's no stamping or die cutting in this project. Everything comes directly from these gorgeous pattern papers. To start, I trimmed out an A2 size panel of this colorful pattern paper that has some printed text on it. I placed it inside the embossing folder, making sure that the embossed pattern is raised on the embossing folder. This will make sure that it really pops once the panel is embossed. I aligned the paper and ran this sandwich through my die cutting machine, and here's a look at that gorgeous texture that you see here on this embossed panel. You could definitely leave the embossed panel as is. It already looks beautiful with all those sentiments pressed onto the paper. But I thought it would be fun to take it a step further and really highlight all those beautiful textures. A great trick for this is to swipe ink pad directly over the raised impressions. For this panel, I'm using the Simon's Stamp White Pigment Ink. I like pigment ink for this technique because it's nice and juicy and sits on the surface of the paper instead of soaking in. I gently swipe the paper across the panel, applying very light pressure so the ink only kisses the raised areas. That way, the embossed words really pop against the colorful pattern paper. Of course, if a little ink gets onto the flat portions of the backgrounds, that's totally fine. It just gives a softer, more blended look and adds character to the panel. Now, one of the greatest things about pigment ink is that it stays wet for a really long time for you to heat emboss on it. So, while my ink was still damp, I sprinkled some of the beautiful sparkle embossing powder. Well, you could absolutely go with clear embossing powder here if you want a clean, crisp, raised effect that keeps the background soft and subtle. But for my card, I decided to use sparkle embossing powder instead. This sparkle powder doesn't overwhelm the design, it's not super glittery or over the top. Instead, it adds this gentle shimmer that catches the light when you tilt the card. It really elevates the background without competing with the pattern paper or the sentiments that we'll be adding later on. It's a simple technique, but it brings so much more depth and interest to an otherwise flat, embossed background. Well, here's a little tip. Now, I forgot to run the anti-static powder tool over the panel before swiping on the pigmenting, so some of the powder ended up settling into the little crevices of the pattern instead of just the raised area. So all I did was tap the panel firmly on the back to knock off any of that excess powder, and most of it came right off. Another thing to note is that it's very important to make sure that your heat gun is fully warmed up before you bring it to your panel because we are embossing the entire background panel here. Also, make sure that the heat gun keeps moving across the panel in steady sweeps. This helps avoid overheating or warping of the cardstock, especially since the pattern paper can sometimes be a little thinner than your regular cardstock. And with that, you have this gorgeous embossed background with shimmery, subtle sparkle that really makes the sentiment words come to life. This is actually the very first time I've created a card with an all sentiment 3D embossed background, and I have to say I'm really loving the results. The texture, the shimmer, and those words of gratitude coming together look so beautiful. Now that our background is ready, it's time to move on to the focal point and the sentiment. Like I mentioned earlier, this project does not involve any stamping or die cutting. Instead, I selected one of the panels from the pattern paper pack that will give me both the elements in one go. The design I chose to feature is this colorful rosette image, and the best part is that it already comes with a sentiment. I trimmed the panel neatly using my paper trimmer so that it would fit nicely as a focal point. Now, before adhering this focal piece, I first attached my sparkly embossed background onto a top folding card base. Because the background has a lot of texture, I used a strong liquid glue to make sure it is adhered well and stayed in place and flat on the card base. Once that was done, I was ready to center the rosette panel and start building up the finished look of my card. I really love how that embossed pattern came together. It's such a showstopper on its own. Honestly, at this point, I could even add a tiny little sentiment strip across the front and call this card done. That's how versatile this embossing folder is, and I can definitely see myself reaching out for it again and again for all kinds of projects. But let's circle back to our focal point piece. To make it stand out even more, I decided to back it up with this absolutely gorgeous pattern paper by Your Paper Insider. Now, it has the most stunning holographic shine, and that reflective finish really helps the centerpiece pop against the textured background. I trimmed the holographic cardstock so that it leaves about a quarter-inch border on all four sides, creating a clean, shiny frame around my rosette panel. Then, to give the focal point some lift and dimension, I adhered it to the center of my sparkly embossed card front using foam tape. That little bit of height not only adds visual interest but also draws the eye right to the sentiment and the rosette image. To add a bit more contrast to this colorful card front, I decided to include a small sub sentiment strip. For this, I grabbed the Reverse Gratitude Sentiment Strip sheet by Simon Stamp. I really love this black base with white lettering. It creates a nice, bold contrast against our colorful background. A fun tip is that these strips are printed on toner sheets, which means that you could use them with your foils. Add foiling to them if you wanted that little bit of extra sparkle on your projects. The sheet has so many different sentiments, and the size is just perfect for tucking in as a sub sentiment on all kinds of gratitude themed cards. For today, I chose the sentiment strip that says "So grateful for you" and adhered it right below my rosette using liquid glue. To make sure it was perfectly straight, I used my T-square ruler to align the strip precisely. This little touch really helps anchor the focal point and adds just the right amount of contrast to make the card feel complete. For the finishing touches, I wanted to bring in a little extra sparkle and movement. I reached for the Surprise Party Sequin Mix by Simon Stamp. It is such a fun and colorful mix that ties in perfectly with the cheerful look of this card. Now, this particular pack is currently unavailable on the Simon Stamp website, but don't worry, I'll be sure to link something similar that would work just as beautifully on this bright and colorful card front. Now, to add even more shimmer, I also brushed a bit of sparkle over the rosette using my glitter brush pen. It's a subtle detail, but when the light catches it, it really enhances the focal point and ties the whole design together with just the right amount of shine. And with that, our sparkly, textured, and totally colorful gratitude card is complete. I absolutely love how the 3D embossed background, the pattern papers, and those little sentiment touches all came together to create something cheerful and heartfelt. I think this card really captures the warmth and appreciation that the Words of Gratitude embossing folder is all about, and it was so fun to experiment with all that shimmer, sequence, and the holographic accents to make the design pop. I hope this gives you some inspiration to try out the sentiment embossed backgrounds or to get creative with your pattern papers in new ways. Now, since I'm participating in this YouTube and Instagram hop, please don't forget to check out the other amazing creators who are sharing their projects too. There's so much talent and inspiration in this community, and this hop is all about giving back and celebrating each other's creativity. I'll make sure to leave the full hop list and links in the description so you can hop along and see all the beautiful cards. I will also have links to all the products that I used in today's video listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.